Perfect. I think
Mm.
we're live, so
Yes, so
I
Lauren, do you want to turn off your camera and microphone as well? Amazing. Thanks for the help.
perfect. All right.
Okay, we're seeing the first people come in, so that's really good.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome everybody. Already got a raised hand. Um, right, welcome guys. I'll just start with a couple of maintenance messages because I'm starting to see a couple of raised hands. If you've got any questions for us, and whether that is sort of technical issues or whether that's questions throughout the session today, make sure that you go and navigate yourself to the questions tab on the right hand side. You should see an icon with a question mark in. That's to ask us anything. If there's any issue with audio, video, anything like that, let us know in there as well, and then we'll have a look at it. But hopefully everybody's getting on okay. I'll use this time because we're expecting a full virtual room today, which is great. But I'll use this time just to give everybody a chance to get comfortable, get yourself another drink, a coffee, etc. Um, and then we'll just run through a couple of sort of maintenance messages whilst everybody gets a chance to join this session. So um, if we go to the next slide, Michelle, we can just quickly run through some of the webinar specifics. So we were quite surprised yesterday to find out that GoToWebinar has pushed an upgrade, a facelift to their interface, which is great and I think much needed. But I appreciate that some of you will also be relatively new to this interface. So take a second to familiarize yourself with everything on here, and then specifically the questions tab. So it's always a little bit tricky in these sessions to get interaction, but we do love a good question. We do love to connect with you. So the questions tab on the right hand side of your screen, marked on this slide as well, will allow you to ask us anything. We will then try to sort of answer them on the go if and when possible. But we do have a pretty full schedule today. We've got a lot to run through. So if we don't get to it throughout the session, we will spend some time on a Q&A towards the end. If all things fail, don't worry, we will follow up with you personally to make sure that all of your questions are answered. Right, that's that about the questions. Another point about interaction is a poll should be coming up somewhat shortly once we start. So expect a poll to pop up on your screen. We'd very much appreciate your input there. Um, I'm going to mention this because we got a couple of questions about it. Michelle and myself, we are both native Dutch speakers, as you would have gotten from the names, but this webinar will be done entirely in English. If you did have any questions or you did want to discuss anything with us after the session in Dutch, then by all means contact us. We've got our contact details here. You can connect with us on LinkedIn and we'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Definitely.
This session is recorded as well. Good to know. So if you did have to dash at some point or you have to leave, then we'll circulate the recording with everybody as well. And then the very final sort of household message is that there will be a survey at the end of this session. So if you do make it to the end of the session, there's going to be about 4 questions that will again pop up on your screen once we close the webinar. It'd be amazing if you could answer those because we can use that feedback to improve our webinars in the future, the content, speaker perhaps, anything that you want to share with us, please share with us. And I think that should be about it. We've got a nice number of guests already, so I suggest we start.
Yeah.
So for those who have just joined us, welcome everybody to this session about unlocking the power of reviews and cross-channel marketing. I mentioned it already, but we have a lot to unpack today. So we're going to get started straight away. Luckily, I've got Michelle with me here today to help me out
Yes.
with a lot of this. Hey, Michelle, thank you for joining.
Hmm.
Mind giving a quick introduction to the audience?
Definitely. So first of all, thank you for everybody who can be here today. It's really lovely to see you. And we're going to deep dive into so many interesting cross-channel topics. So it's really good that you're here and tuning in, and especially during your lunchtime. Like, welcome with your lunch, I hope. My name is Michelle Reed, and I'm the head of marketing for Benelux and Sweden at Trustpilot. I've been here for around 2 years, so I have quite a lot of knowledge now on how to actually use reviews in your day-to-day, in your marketing activities, and really get the best out of that. So I'm very excited to share a lot of that knowledge with you today, and to be here with Niels, of course.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm host number two today, so I'm representing Dotdigital in this session. So I'll be focusing a little bit more on the channel piece, whereas Michelle will be focusing obviously more on the review piece. Um, Part of the partnerships team and have been so for the past 5 years. Really enjoy the space of marketing tech, and that's because I'm a marketeer at heart. I used to be a digital marketeer in my previous life, responsible for the channels that we used at the organization back then. So I know some of the pain points and some of the challenges that you probably face as well. So I'm hoping to share a couple of tips with you today. As I mentioned, if there is anything that you'd like to follow up on with us directly, you've got our email addresses here. So make sure to connect with us.
I love that you're saying in a previous life, Niels.
It feels very much like a previous life. 5 years is a long time. So, and I'm not sure at this stage. I've been 5 years in partnerships, and I'm not sure if I can still call myself a marketeer. So it feels
Marketeer
like
at
the
heart.
right thing to say. Exactly. That's it. That's it.
Amazing.
Cool. All right.
I think
Um,
we're gonna
yeah,
do a little introduction, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. So of course you know us, but it's also kind of good to maybe know a little bit about what we do, what the company does, etc. As I mentioned before, I work at Trustpilot, and what we basically are is a platform for consumers where they can leave their reviews about the companies. But as a company, you can then harvest a lot of the knowledge of the customers, have start interactions with them, invite your own customers as well, to get like your online reputation to a stronger level. And then after, you can actually use a lot of that review content in your own marketing channels. And that's something that we're going to deep dive in a bit more today, because here you can see that um, a lot of consumers, they know Trustpilot, they use Trustpilot. So when you add something like that to your own website, it really adds a lot of value, like that piece of the social proof. So I didn't necessarily talk about all the numbers on the screen, but you've seen them, so I'm not going to go too much into all of that. But that's a bit about Trustpilot, and if anything is unclear, of course, feel free to reach out to me, as Niels mentioned before. And then Dotdigital, what do you do?
Yes, digital. Yeah, we do a lot. So we've got a tagline, which I'm going to just share with you because it still does the job, right? So we are a customer experience data platform. So what we allow marketeers to do, because that's important, the platform is really built for marketeers, is that we allow you to combine your customer data. But that's something a lot of platforms do. I think the power of Dotdigital really sits in the fact that we surface super valuable insights about your audience. So in the case of brands selling online with a commerce store, we will surface a lot of valuable intel about your customers' purchase behavior, but also about the engagement levels, when is the right time to reach out to them. So a lot of the things that marketers need to really connect with their audience, and that's the key of Dotdigital, I guess. Um, we are an originally British company, but we now span across the globe with teams in pretty much all of the regions that you can come up with, and customers in those regions as well. Again, a nice statistic there about the sheer volume that we deal with on days like Black Friday, which is definitely one of the peaks that we're dealing with at Dotdigital. But Dotdigital is a lot more than email, so it's much more about that data layer and connecting with your audience on the right channel, as we'll discuss today. We're carbon neutral, which we're very proud about. We're the first marketing automation platform, or CXDP as we call ourselves, um, in our space to be carbon neutral. And that's not the end of it. We're going to continue to take steps to become carbon positive. So um, It's a pretty big year for us as well. So we're celebrating 25 years this year. So quick math
Congrats.
will, yeah, thank you very much.
I didn't
Quick,
know.
yeah, it's a very big year. We've got a couple of events coming up. So for those who are connected with us already on socials and email, keep an eye out for that. But yeah, quick math, this takes us back to 1999. So a lot has changed. A lot of channels has been added as well. So we'll be discussing a lot of that in this session today,
Yeah.
which then I think
And
nicely leads us into the agenda. Yeah, so we've got a lot to cover. It's going to be a nice combination of Michelle and myself. So we're going to get started with cross-channel marketing, explain a little bit more about that. Then Michelle will take that into the reviews part of the presentation or the webinar to explain a little bit more about the benefits of using reviews. Then we're going to look at CX, so customer experience with cross-channel marketing. We're gonna take you through sort of how to get started with some of those channels, what are the things to consider, and what are some of the good examples that we're seeing across various brands. Um, then we'll have a look at conversions and improving those by using social proof. And we'll finish things off with a Q&A session towards the end. We set out about 45 minutes for this entire webinar, so we'll have to see how we are doing on time throughout this session. But again, ask us anything in the questions section of this GoToWebinar interface.
yeah.
Right, we're going to start with a bit of interaction, or at least going to give that a go. Which channels do you currently use? So a poll question should pop up very shortly because we're curious to hear from you. What are some of the channels that you are currently using for your own marketing and to connect with your audience? Um, Obviously, there's way more channels out there. Michelle, if we look at those channels, is that everything that you are using as a marketeer?
Yeah, so I think I use a lot of email actually, which is quite surprising, I feel, because it feels really old school. But I think it's really like a nice way to actually connect with people that are interested and to actually show some added value, such as sharing these webinars or sharing like fun interactive pieces. But we're also very active on social media, of course. We don't do so much with SMS, but actually, Neos, Dotdigital, and Trustpilot just made a connection with that. So we're going to touch base upon that later. So
Absolutely.
definitely a really interesting channel to also think about.
Yeah.
WhatsApp, not that much yet. I think that's very new. I mean, probably a lot of people are already using it. And website, of course, like
Yeah.
daily, I would say. So that's yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a lot of the channels that we also use.
And are you missing any key channels here? Because I appreciate that there's so many more, but
Yeah, oh, I mean, you can also go super granular, right? Like social media, which of the
true.
social medias are you using? Are you using it just for posting? Are you using it for messaging? There's so many different ways that we can also use these channels as well, which I think you're going to also touch base upon a bit, right?
Absolutely will, yes. I mean, we could have gone with an endless list here, right? Every region is different, every customer is different, all of your audiences will be different. But I think overall, these are the channels that we will be discussing today. So that makes sense. We've got a nice number of guests today that have voted. So thank you all so much for that. And that's really interesting to see. It's probably what we would have expected to see, Michelle.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
cool to see also that already quite some are starting to use like dip their toes into WhatsApp and SMS. That's really like the trendsetters, I think,
Yeah.
in the markets that are already doing that. That's really cool to see.
Yeah. Exactly. I think also it's worthwhile noticing or noting here that we obviously have an audience today that is very much cross-region. So some of you will be operating in markets where SMS, for example, is quite widely used. We see, for example, in France that SMS is quite widely adopted. Whereas I think
Yeah,
here, where I'm based in Amsterdam, Netherlands, we still get quite a lot of, not pushback, but quite a lot of questions about whether it really works, whether it's really, because again, it feels a bit old school to some people, but it's really making a comeback. So we'll dive into that in great detail today, but thank you all so much for participating in that. And that kind of leads us nicely into the cross-channel marketing part of this session. Um, we're going to discuss a little bit about what it is and why it's important. I think the what is it question is quite obvious. It's using a mix of channels to make sure that you can connect with your audience. So it's all about making sure that you understand the channels that are being used by your audience by looking into demographics of your audience. And the why of it is simply because everybody is on multiple channels these days, and making sure that you get the attention of your audience isn't always as easy as it maybe once was. So this is a relatively old statistic from a Harvard Business Review article saying that about 3 out of 4 customers use multiple channels during their shopping journey. I don't think that's a very shocking statistic. That's something we're all very much aware of. If we go to the next slide, however, the reason that it's important for you as a brand, for you as an organization to be on those channels as well is that typically you'll see that customers that have multiple experiences or multiple touch points with you as a brand will turn out to be more loyal and repeating customers as well, which is ultimately what we want. So we can easily say that uh, offering that omni-channel or that multi-channel experience is going to create a better customer experience. And if we dive into that a little bit more, there's multiple models about that to show that, and this is one of them. Thanks, Michelle. Um, so awareness, consideration, purchase, retention, loyalty. So the customer life cycle, as we call that, is something that can be shown in many different ways. This to me actually highlights the challenges that you have as a marketeer these days to make sure that you're present at all these different channels, that you connect with your audience at all these channels. But I think ultimately it's about making sure that you understand where and how to connect with your audience, and making sure that you personalize your approach as well, depending on the stage that your customer is in. And there's really good tools to do that. Um, and I think it's really cool to see that at a lot of these touch points, you can use things like user generated content, reviews, um, to make sure that you again get across in an authentic way and you can really connect with your audience. Obviously, this is a slide that we kind of stole from you guys. Michelle, is there anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, so I think something that's quite interesting in cross-channel as well is there's so many cross-channel type of examples that we don't even think about necessarily. Like I was quite surprised recently by one like stat. I don't know the stats by heart, but where Google showed that people who are actually in the stores often still there check their email to see if there's some specific nice discount happening, or they'll also check the website and perhaps even order online. So there's like even in online and offline, like these kind of cross-channel moments, which are very crucial. So even there, it's quite interesting to see the impact this omni-channel has on your business as well. So I think that's a really interesting piece that for me was very like, oh, okay, like very unexpected, but it kind of makes sense. Like, how do you actually bring all these channels together? Today, we'll focus a bit more on online, so we're not going to talk too much about offline and online.
Yeah,
But I do think that that's a very interesting thing to also be aware of if you also have offline
yeah,
shops. Mm.
yeah, that's a great shout. Yeah. Um, And that brings us sort of into the why, right? So why go cross-channel?
Mm.
I think the evidence is there. It's quite obvious why you have to be on different channels because that's where you'll find your audience. But it also creates a seamless communication and a seamless experience. So by being on the channels, on the sort of media that your customers are, it will just ensure a consistent messaging across those channels. It will increase the number of touch points, increasing the relevance as well. And ultimately, what it's all about, so all of the arguments that you're seeing here, kind of one word that sits between those is trust. So being where your customers are and being seen by them is going to create a level of trust. Um, it will boost customer retention, so we touched on that as well. It enables you to stay connected with your customers through the various touch points. So that is going to result into more loyalty and repeat purchases. Another really important thing about this is that because you are active on multiple channels and that's where you find your customers, you're going to be gathering a lot of valuable insights and data about your customers and their preferences, allowing you to then alter and change your communication style with them, the timing that you communicate with them, but also the channel and the messaging that you communicate with. And finally is that brand visibility, which we kind of discussed already, which is obviously going to be enhanced by being at all these different channels. And I think in the end, it's about choosing channels that fit your brand and about testing a lot of them and seeing what works for you and for your audience. Right.
Ooh, and then I don't know if you still wanted to say anything else about the
And no, no,
question.
that was it. I was going to hand over to you.
Okay, okay. So I think then one of the points that we're going into is actually how reviews make these marketing efforts go further, because of course you have like so many of these different channels. And I think something that we're actually seeing is that one of the main channels, for example, that we're looking at today, we're going to talk about a couple of different channels. One of these channels that we're seeing is actually that Google. Like generally, a lot of people, they start their search in search, surprisingly. But what we actually see there is already an impact that you can have when you have some form of trust. So reviews are kind of a form of trust. People look at the peer-to-peer. They look at like these aspects of, is this a new company? Is this something different? I'm sorry, by the way, if the lighting keeps changing. I think that's really happening a lot. There's some clouds coming by, and I thought daylight was a great option. But what we see here in search is actually that um, Trustpilot itself, like as a page, comes up more and more for people that are searching, because they are searching for those points of trust. So even in like these type of channels, people are already looking for cues that are trustworthy. Things that we're seeing there as well is like when we have like widgets, when customers have widgets on their website, we see like 104 billion impressions on these widgets where companies are actually already showcasing these reviews. So customers are looking at which touch points throughout these type of channels are there, which things can I actually rely on. And we also see, and this is quite interesting, that it's actually impacting buying behavior a lot. So we see that like 65%, so this was a research done by London Research earlier this year actually, and around a couple of hundreds of EU consumers, and we saw that like 65% say that reviews impacted their decision during that process, basically. And also that actually 63%, which is very close to the other number, is actually more likely to buy from a brand if they even have a good Trustpilot score. So yeah, this is a bit Trustpilot focused, but it is really telling that the consumers are actually showing or that interest in trust and really are looking for that as well. So why is this so important, especially in this year? Like we've seen so much growth in the last couple of years. Like we see that like 2 billion e-commerce customers, we have 2 billion e-commerce customers worldwide. We have extreme growth in shops, even like just in the Netherlands alone, that in the past couple of years. And we also see that there is a decline and customers are less loyal more quickly. So even if there's like one bad experience, we already see that a customer will not likely go back to this brand. So it's a lot about the trust, about showing what is actually already happening, what are your USPs already from the beginning, and these kind of things to actually really be there and showcase that, because as the landscape is getting so big in the e-commerce world, how can you still differentiate? So this is something that we, of course, as marketeers see in addition to some more issues. So more competition, but also we have less budget lately. We are under a lot of pressure to work on a lot of ROI. At least definitely me as a marketer has that, and I know you guys have this as well because it is stats based on different researches as well. And we actually, it just becomes more and more difficult for us to stand out, but also with less budget. So it is like quite a big challenge that we are then facing and have to deal with. What we then actually see is that e-commerce conversion rates can get quite a big boost, which is around 2.5 or 3% due to reviews. So it does help in a lot of those cross-channel channels to actually boost the conversions that you currently have. So getting basically more ROI with hopefully the same amount of effort almost. So one of these examples that I wanted to show you as well is that actually at this moment, 93% of these review related searches actually show Trustpilot. But we also see some interesting stats from Google where they actually say that when you have those reviews in Google, right? So those are coming from Trustpilot as well. We are a Google review partner. Then they actually measured that they see 10% additional clicks to these types of ads as well. And then on top of that, I want to say, you also see that organic results with reviews actually perform a lot better. And this, I think, is because it stands out. Like if you see a huge page of all the ads, of all the links that you could click, having some color there, having that social proof, like actually pops in quite a white page in a way. So just that in the first type of channel already helps a lot. And actually I found this example of this customer because it's not only e-commerce related, it's like quite a broad like number that Google shared. It's not necessarily only e-commerce, it's a general number, right? So even in this case, we saw actually with this customer, Dormio Resorts and Hotels, that they saw 20% higher organic Google traffic after implementing like reviews as well in their well, day-to-day across channel, using it on their website, making sure that it's connected, is properly communicating with Google, and that's something that Trustpilot does, for example. So yeah, there's like a lot of these kind of things that could really benefit you. But also some things such as social ads. So this is actually in this same London research report that was done earlier this year. We actually also saw some very interesting numbers, because review, if we just look at general review content that exists out there, there's a lot of different aspects to that. You have the stars, you have a score, like maybe 4.8, where you maybe see the 5 stars, you have the number of reviews, there's quotes, and also if you use an independent platform, you can also have that as part of like the trustworthiness of your review. So basically a lot of different types of review content that you can also utilize in your ads. And we actually see that 64% of EU consumers are more likely to click through if an ad contains Trustpilot as well. But we also found that when you add, you know, 3,000+ reviews, if you add a quote, if you add a star rating, and all of those ones, then it's like 9 times more likely to click on your ad versus on a different one. So that's quite insane. And there's so much space to test with review content that you perhaps have, or that you maybe still want to grow. So there's a lot of things that you could also work on there. One more interesting case I just wanted to share with you. So this one is, I think it's a Swedish example as well, called Norrbutiker, and they saw these little steps. They also actually saw that when they added Trustpilot in their website as well, 37% more items were added to the shopping cart. So this is just one more option of where a consumer comes in contact with your brand, gets that correct touch point, gets that like instant moment of, okay, they are also trustworthy. And then you see that they actually have a better funnel because of that. So that's quite interesting to see. So that's my huge spiel on like all the different reviews and types of content that you can also use there. And then I think I'm handing it over again to Nils to talk more about cross-channel marketing in CX.
Yes, great stuff. A lot of interesting stats in there. got a few questions, but we can maybe save that to the end. We're indeed going to extend this into the cross-channel piece now. So how can you actually leverage multiple channels? And we're going to dive into a couple, the ones that you would have seen at the poll at the start. Um, give you a couple of examples, give you a few reasons to use it, etc. And then hopefully that's going to inspire you to connect with your audience in a different way following this session. We also do get to the point towards the end of the session where we kind of connect Trustpilot and Dotdigital and see how you can leverage that in channels. So bear with us. For now, we're going to start with SMS as a channel. And as I mentioned at the start, it's something that we very much see and notice is perceived in very different ways in different countries. So usually with things like this, we'll notice a trend happening in the US. It will then come to the UK. And then in some countries, it will be picked up afterwards in Europe as well. And SMS is one of those. We get questions about it, but as yes, absolutely. Um, it's showing really good results with our customers. And I think for a lot of customers, I've seen a couple of use cases around the last Black Friday, for example, and Christmas, where a customer of ours have started using SMS to kind of cut through the noise of emails and sort of the more traditional channels being used. So SMS is a really good way. It's obviously very short, very concise. So it requires you as a marketeer to be very mindful of what it is that you're communicating and what your call to action is. But that often results in a click-through rate that is at least twice as high as email, for example. So the conversion rates are way better. The open rate is better as well, although I always think that this statistic is a little bit skewed because you tend to just kind of click on mark as read or maybe quickly open it because you want to get rid of the notification. But I guess the fact is it is seen by a lot of your customers and your audience, which is ultimately what you want with the message that is that short in size. The other thing, which is a bit of a byproduct, which I never realized, but 1 out of 5 SMSs are forwarded on to family and friends. And that is an extremely interesting statistic. It means that even though we intend that SMS to be sort of personal and sort of like a one-to-one communication, this is a nice byproduct of SMS, and you're reaching an audience that initially you wouldn't have reached with using email, for example, or with using another channel, even though that also could have been forwarded. But this is something we're strongly seeing with SMS, for example. On the next slide, yes. So a lot of you will kind of struggle with getting started with SMS. And if that is a channel of interest for you, then obviously there's a couple of things for you to consider, but it doesn't have to be hard. In fact, there's actually a lot of things that you can already get started with. So initially, it's kind of looking at your current database, looking at your contact list to see what data you currently hold on the mobile number front. So how much mobile numbers do you currently have? If you don't have those, then that's not an issue at all. You can start using opt-ins at like crucial moments in a customer journey. You could also just use email still as a channel, obviously, to introduce a new channel to your customers and ask them to both opt in and share their mobile number with you. Opt-in is possible in multiple ways. So within Dotdigital, for example, you'll be able to use opt-in at checkout. You'll be able to get the opt-in and the phone number through forms, for example. So there's multiple ways that you can start collecting that data. Then, of course, there's a piece around the tech. So some of you will be using external SMS provider. I think it's important that you select an SMS provider that is going to be able to send to the regions that you want to be sending to and has the reach. Ultimately, I think you'd want to get all of that data, all of that information into one place. So being able to report on it, like we said at the start, testing is incredibly important. It comes back at the sort of final step, but it's a channel that requires you to sort of see what works for you. And I think that ties in with the step of setting clear goals for yourself. So don't start rolling out SMS for each and every piece of communication that you're doing, but start thinking about specific marketing goals for SMS. We know that it's very short, we know it's very concise. So you're going to have to use it for very specific things. And so in our case, we're seeing a lot of customers using this for things like abandoned carts. So reminding people that there's something in the cart, giving them a reason to complete that. For example, they might lose the card, or they could benefit from a specific discount that's going to end at midnight, something like that. So
Mm.
adding a sense of urgency is incredibly important as well in that. But make sure that you pick one or two sort of clear pieces of communication that you want to use SMS for. I think in general it's used a lot as a piece of service offering. So managing the customer's experience, managing that customer journey as well. So giving them updates, preparing them for visits, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think the other important thing here is also like being very structural with it. So if you're only going to send one SMS, that's going to kind of startle your customers. It's going to startle your audience. So making sure that they expect to hear from you in SMS, that's going to require a bit of work. But again, being clear in your communication and in the follow-up and in the execution is going to be incredibly important there.
And I can like immediately think of like a really cool example. Like if you are now thinking of Black Friday, which I guess a lot of us are, like having this SMS just saying, "Hey, did you see our email? 50% discount." Like then like you're really using that cross-channel approach, right? You're using the email as your main, but then you're using the SMS to enhance and even lead back to email possibly. Stuff like that, I feel could be very interesting to test.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's what we highlighted at the start is that it's a really good way to sort of increase the touch points, but also
Mm,
making sure that the message that you want to convey comes across to your audience. So absolutely.
mm,
Black Friday is a great one. It's things like that where you just want to grab the attention, remind them of something, because we do have so many channels that we're all active on. So it's important that we grab their attention at the right time through the right channel. Here's a typical example, right? So this is one of our customers. They use SMS very much in that guiding and sort of customer journey sense of like reminding visitors of clubs, of spas, etc., to make sure that they're informed about things they can expect. So, for example, bring your own towel, or it's going to be extra busy today. Things like that are really going to help a customer to sort of prepare for their visit, but also get in that state of like, yes, we're going there, we booked this slot, um, and it's just a very thoughtful and attentive approach to guiding your customers. All right, then we're getting into the next channel, messaging apps. We highlighted WhatsApp as an example at the start of this session in the poll, for example, but Facebook Messenger is another example. Something that we're seeing more and more being requested by customers. And it's obvious why, right? Like it's a bit scary, I think, to the marketeer that's just getting started with it because this is conversational rather than one-sided. So it does again require a strategy for you. But again, we're seeing clear boosts in conversion. It's very obvious that customers are using these channels. So WhatsApp is being used by 5 billion users, 2 billion active users. So it's a no-brainer to start including this if this fits your brand, if this fits your products and your service offering, obviously. 66% of consumers feels more confident about purchases. And I think, again, that has to do with the fact that you're humanizing your brand. You're giving your customers a person to talk to. They feel heard. And I've got a good example of that, I think, on the next slide, or maybe I'm being too quick. I am being too quick. Because we've got a couple of tips for this. And if you are an existing Dotdigital customer, then it's good to know that we're working on very exciting things around things like WhatsApp. So make sure to check in with your customer success manager there because you can probably start using this faster than you might think. But it's about, again, fitting it into your strategy. So what are the things that you want to use this for? And there's ultimately two ways that WhatsApp or Meta allows you to use WhatsApp, for example. And that's first of all in service setting, being able to help your customers around their purchase, around any sort of ongoing issues or things, challenges they may come across in their journey. And the other thing is marketing, but it will require you to have a strategy to, again, gather the opt-in and making sure that your customers expect to hear from you on this channel. And I think that's key, right? Um, Automate responsibly is another one. So it's very appealing to start with chatbots and AI so that you don't have to do all of this yourselves. But it's very important to think about the time where you want the customer to be switched over to a support agent, to a human representative. Um, and then a multi-channel, oh, sorry, there was one more, multi-channel flexibility. Um, Cross-channel platform integrations that allow customer service representatives to switch between channels seamlessly is very important, obviously, again, to maintain that consistency in your conversations, regardless of the platform. And then we were going to the example. I was a bit too quick before. But clearly we wanted to get to this example. Rituals is a good example of using WhatsApp. Frank, my colleague, reached out to Rituals because one of his gift vouchers wasn't working. Then that is the ultimate way to help a customer through WhatsApp, because you're giving them the option to speak with you and to come to a solution. If you don't offer any of these and you're only sending, not receiving, there is a very high chance that you're going to churn as a customer. You're going to look for a solution elsewhere. You're going to look for a different provider, or you're just going to end up being a frustrated customer. So conversational apps, messaging apps, are a great way to enhance the customer experience. Then we get to the next part, which is social media. We discussed it a little bit already at the start, and there's so many different channels out there. I think the benefits of it are pretty obvious. A lot of the audience uses it. Um, I don't think we really have to spend tons of time on this because that is quite obvious. I think it's key for you as a marketeer to understand which channels work for you, and it's again a matter of testing um, what is a good way for you to connect. But it's about the demographics that you're serving, right? So making sure that you connect with them at the right place at the right time. It's a really good way to kind of combine organic and paid reach. So again, something that a lot of you are probably already doing. Um, but I think the main reason to be using social media and user-generated content in general is that trust piece that Michelle highlighted earlier. It allows your brand to come across as authentic, but also as human. And I think we all want to connect with a brand. We want to have reasons to buy from brand. We want to feel good about a purchase, right? And I think social media is the ultimate outlet to sort of do that. On the next slide, we've got an example. We've got another cool example coming up soon, which we'll highlight. But Daniel Wellington, that's a cool example of how they use user-generated content on their Instagram account. So again, showing their products in real life settings with real life people. And I think that is such a powerful thing because it allows you to, again, connect with that brand, to kind of identify yourself with the brand and with the audience that they're servicing. And that leads us to the final channel. And Michelle, you kind of labeled it as an old school channel, and I think a lot of people
It's
agree
still
with
very
you.
happening.
Yeah, but it's still, as we said in sessions in previous years, email is still king. I mean, we'd be crazy if we said that email is still the same. We see things changing. Your audiences are changing, are getting younger, want to interact with you on different brands, on different channels. But email remains a very powerful channel in the sense that you own the narrative. You completely own the creative. This is a space that you can entirely fill as a brand with your assets, with your copy, etc. And email is becoming powerful in exactly that way that you described earlier, Michelle, in combination with other channels. So enhancing the messaging across different channels. And Mamas and Papas is a customer of ours that used that in a very clever way. So they had a very big product launch for a new pushchair. They have a big audience, a big database, and they wanted to go out with a big bang for this product launch specifically. They use a combination of email that was super rich in content, attention grabbing, strong in copy to deliver the right messaging, very much focusing on the USPs of this push chair. So ensuring their customers, like soon-to-be parents or new parents, about the safety features and the practicalities of this push chair. Um, it was a big launch, like I said. They used various channels for this, but they used Dotdigital to make sure that they could follow up on the email by retargeting customers that either showed interest in the email or in any of the touch points before in this push chair, um, by retargeting them on social media with paid ads. Something you can do by creating an audience in Dotdigital and then retargeting them. And it did the same thing with the audience that didn't actually interact or engage with the email. And they use that to then retarget those customers on social media with slightly different content in video format. So again, it's very much about understanding where you can find your audience and serving them with the content that's going to work for them. So for them, that just meant that they saw a lot of traffic to the website specifically for this push chair. And 66% of that traffic was generated through the combination of email and that retargeting campaign, which is really great to see.
Yeah. I think we're almost already at time, so maybe we
Yeah,
can skip the
I'll speed up.
example.
Again,
Mm.
this is a great example about channels, cross-channel. Le Col is a cycling apparel brand, and they're using Strava, which isn't really a channel that we're discussing in great detail. But I think the main message here is find the channels that use for you and start looking for that cross-channel experience to enhance that message. We'll send the slides over afterwards as well if you want, so you can have a look at this in more detail.
And then I think we have the final channel, which is actually websites. And I think in this case also, like it's of course one of those crucial channels where like I think it's super interesting to see like how can you use your channels for interaction, like here as well, there's like a live chat, but also to enhance, of course, the actions that you're doing. As Niels mentioned, for example, you have perhaps like an email, you're going to retarget on SMS, but then of course you're also going to optimize your website, just like this customers doing BetaBet, they're also adding like this 15% extra discount if you switch your mattress, like something like that that can really enhance this message or give an even better experience as well. And then of course you can use that again to retarget in your email campaigns or an SMS again, or like these kind of things. So we don't go into this too much, but it is quite interesting to see as well that this is definitely not the channel to ignore. And I think then we go to some of your final points.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I think we discussed most of these, right? So define the objectives and choose the channels that work for you. I think I repeated myself there a couple of times. Content, choose a content that fits the channel. So like we said, SMS is super short and concise, but you can expand on that in different channels. And then test, and
Just
monitor. That's it. So I think that leads us into the final part of this session.
yeah. So thank you all for staying hopefully a little bit longer. So I think next part of the of this is kind of looking a bit more into reviews again. And what I think is very key also in some of the things that Niels mentioned in a lot of these newer channels like SMS or social or these messaging apps is that whoever is on the receiving end is really also looking for interaction. And I think this is also something that's important. It's not really in the slides, but to talk about just really shortly in reviews, because that's one of the main things that actually customers expect. Because reviews are very much like at the end when you ask a review, when you get maybe become like a loyal customer, but you also have the dissatisfied users. And actually, that interaction there is almost as important because we do see that people will actually convert if they get a very positive customer experience after. So a lot of this channels that we're discussing now. And I really think it's so interesting that you also mentioned it so much, Niels, that the interaction is also very important. So choose your channels wisely because interaction will also happen. So that's also one of the things that I think is really interesting on top of, using the channels to boost each other's performance as well. So now we're going to talk about reviews, reaping rewards, even when budgets are minimal. And I just want to share some of these examples as well, where actually we see in ads, because that's also something that Niels mentioned a lot before. So that's a little bit of the focus of this slide, to actually get, even if you have a smaller budget, to really push that. So let's say you choose socials as one of your channels, be sure that you can interact on there, but also make sure that you add those proof points, showcase what your customers are saying about you, or do it in a bit more of a subtle way. And I wanted to just give some examples of review content and how some others are using it. So for example, Fairphone in the top right, they are expanding to France. And in that case, they were also testing would it work better in our awareness campaign to add a quote, or to have a focus more on the number and on that they're using a independent provider, because people don't know them that much yet. So it was really interesting to see in this case that the quote, with the example without the quotes, actually give them a higher click-through rate. A completely different type of example, SendCloud. They actually also tested this, and it lowered their costs by 30%. So something like this, we all deal with smaller budgets than we want. It is very interesting to see, okay, how can you actually implement this, test different things. I think one of the key things here is always to test, to really get higher conversions as well from these ads and across the channels that you are using. Sorry. One more example, which is really cross channel, is Parfumerie Pintanel. They actually sell perfumes. And in this case as well, they've seen like a lot of benefits by using the reviews in a lot of the different channels. So they've actually seen in email, which is one of the old school channels that we all still really love, that actually when they added like quite subtly something about that proof, that they had 4% higher click-through rates in email comps and 8% more conversions from these emails that included these small signs of social proof. And when they added it and tested it in different social media channels, they also saw that they had a 26% higher click-through rate and 19% higher conversion rate. So it's like across a lot of different types of channels and a lot of different industries where we see that this works. So increasing conversions by using social proof. Why is this working? And where is this working? We actually have done some research, and we saw that most of the consumers that are using like your business, they will always search for information about you on website first, social channels, and digital advertising, and then come a lot of the other ones. So these are like some of the key points where you can get the most benefit if you want to add some social proof. And why is this actually working? Why it's working is because social proof, like reviews, are actually created by the user. It's not something that you are saying about your business. It's something someone else is saying about your business. And what we actually see is that 79% say that if there is user-generated content, then it really impacts their purchasing decision. And around 80% of shoppers, which is also what we're seeing a lot on social media, for example, right? Like a lot of influencers creating their own content on how they like or didn't like the product, how they like the training, whatever it is. They also say that that part is actually something that convinces people a lot, so that user-generated type of content to actually then purchase from an online store. Then, so just to summarize the review part, how do you actually increase conversions with social proof? First is really to showcase the customer reviews throughout your website. We have seen with our customers, that's of course some of the data we have, is that there's 23% increase in conversions that they are seeing generally. So of course that varies a lot, depends also how you're going to implement. Some tips are not on the slide, but I'm going to tell you guys because you're still here and I really appreciate that. Checkout page, always add social proof on the checkout page if you can. If you are also collecting product reviews, definitely on the product pages and implement on the category pages. A lot of people don't do that. And add it always in like your home or in the top or in the footer as well of the pages. We see a lot of good results with that. And then of course there's so many variation possible as well. So really display if you are collecting reviews already. Start doing that, etc. Then also really use them in your social media platforms. We do see that when you have these reviews in your campaigns, between people click through more often, between 10 and 20%. Depends also on which content you use. It could be a quote, it could be perhaps just the number, it could be a stars. There's so many different options you could test, but we do see that there's increased click-through rate. And we also see that around 66% of consumers are inspired more to actually purchase when this occurs. So that's really good to really highlight, or also if you are collecting reviews, find those USPs that customers are saying in their reviews, learn from your reviews, and then add those ones as well in your socials. Highlight that, or use a quote specifically to highlight the USPs that you have. Stuff like that is really good. It's really genuine. It's actual and factual. Well, subjective, factual, but someone else telling about you as well. It's really a lot better than you only saying that you're amazing, which it doesn't always work for the end consumer, of course. And this one is quite interesting. It's not a channel that we have touched base on, but it's recent research from Kantar, where we actually saw that even adding some trust points in your TV ads can have an impact on how your brand is received. So we actually see that the levels of trust go up with 7 percentage points. So that's quite a big change. So if you're already planning to do and spend a lot of money, again, we're all talking about ROI all the time, spend some money, but make sure that it's more effective throughout the entire cross marketing channel and all the channels that we have, for sure. So that's it on the review. But of course, we also have a connection now, which we really wanted to just tell you guys about because it's quite interesting. Did you want to take this, Niels?
I can, and actually received two questions around this piece. So perhaps we can spend a bit of time on that as well. I can briefly talk through this because essentially Dotdigital and Trustpilot, if you're a customer of either or both, then good news. You can use the integration between the two to invite your customers to leave a review. And you can use both email and SMS for that. So again, in that whole customer journey, have a think about whether that is something that you can leverage and whether you can kind of switch off the channels there. And that is obviously going to help you to improve the customer journey, but also other customers' journeys. You can use this integration in a way that there's a block available within our email editor where you can quite easily then use those reviews to include them in product emails, for example. So if you're doing an abandoned cart, you can include, similar to what Michelle was just saying, you could add some social proof to make sure that you really convince that customer, give them a good feeling about the product that they are about to buy. And you can use segments based on the interaction that you're seeing with your customers leaving reviews. So you can create a segment with 5-star reviews, for example, making sure that they can recommend their friends, for example, in a separate program, or that they maybe leave another review. So that is possible currently already between Dotdigital and Trustpilot. And I guess we got a question around this piece because we obviously talked a lot about using social proof and all of the benefits that it has. But I guess the first step for a lot of companies is getting those reviews. And we got one question from Elisa, who's working for an education provider. So that's obviously a very different industry than those that we discussed today. That was maybe a little bit more commerce-led or more like travel industry-led. She's saying we don't really need return customers because it's education, but it's important to attract new students and for them to have a positive experience and leave positive reviews. How can we apply this as a service provider?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So I think some of the things that is really good is, first off, maybe if you're not looking for necessarily return customers, that's okay. But at least one of the things that you're doing at the end of the full UX journey of this user is checking in. Was their experience actually good? Like often you can then learn from their experience and actually make the programs better, make whoever is doing the trainings, inform them about specific points that could be better or that are already going very well and you should focus on more, for example. But then when you have collected a lot or a bunch, you can then also add this to your acquisition channels. So this is some of the channels in the cross, if we're looking at the full cross-channel world. Like these are some of the places where maybe you want to be found or where people are already finding you, such as on Google search, for example. If you collect enough reviews, then your reviews, at least via some of the providers, it doesn't always happen if you do it yourself. But if you're working with some specific provider or Google review partners, then it will also automatically be added to Google. So if people are searching for your business on Google, that's already a place where you could then add it, add some of the social proof. If you are promoting via social ads, this is also a place where you can test which type of content works. Could you add a quote? Could you add a number of reviews as well? Stuff like that. I guess if it's really competitive, think about, do you want to maybe do this with your own quotes that you already have collected, or maybe do you want to, if you're branching out to somewhere new, do you maybe want to have a trusted provider that's already there? So there's all these things as well to think about, I would say, in the educational world as well. So I hope
That's
that
really good.
answers your question a bit.
Yeah. Well, if not, let us know as well, Elisa. We're gonna have to round up really soon, but I think
Yeah.
one final question which kind of ties in with that is, and Lauren mentioned it. We've got a couple of other questions. Frank, Ziao, and Quinton, we're gonna get back to you personally as we're running out of time. But I think the one last question that I'd be quite interested in as well is, how do you get people to leave a review? Like, what are some of the incentives that you can use as a brand? Is it always a discount code in the case of an education
Ooh,
provider? That's obviously
that's
tricky.
that's a
Uh,
good one that you're saying that, because actually never do that. If you leave an incentive, that's actually illegal. So don't do that.
right, okay.
That's what
Well,
I would
there we go.
say. If you want to ask for a review, there's a couple of things you can do to optimize the process. Um, First off, ask. People don't really leave a review if you don't ask. So that's the first step. Just start asking. Then find those moments, for example, when maybe there's a trigger. For example, they end their trainings, maybe that changes something in your system, then you send the review, for example. If it's like e-commerce, then what I would recommend is test send at some point. Generally, when people have received packages is better than when they've just bought, perhaps if you want to get the product reviews, because then they're happy because they've received it. So test also, like, does it maybe work for you to send the review invite directly? Does it work to send it after a couple of days? If nobody's responding, maybe can you adjust the email so it fits your need a bit better, or could you send them a reminder? Like a lot of these kind of points will also help more people to respond to the review invites as well that you're
Yeah,
sending. So don't do the discounts or
no,
don't offer something in return, because then people might respond more positive just because of that, which sounds nice, but it's actually not legal to do that. So it's always something we always discourage.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's really good to know, I think. Perfect. We're gonna have to leave it at that, I'm afraid. We ran over, so thank you everybody for staying on. Any
yeah.
closing thoughts, Michelle, before we, I know that there is a survey that's gonna come up
Oh,
and
I
there
just
is a
wanted to
QR
say,
code as well.
because we now have this integration together, if you do want to use this really cool feature of Dotdigital where you can ask review invites via SMS and email and all the other nice things that Niels just mentioned, check out their page on the integration. This is going to the Dotdigital site, and make sure to have a look if you think it's interesting and kind of see uh, how could you maybe use it. If you're already using Trustpilot and you're already using Dotdigital, definitely do that. If not, then you can still use it at maybe another point in your own journey. So yeah,
Good
that's all I
stuff.
wanted to say. And thank you so
That's
much
great.
also for staying a bit longer. Honestly, that's
Yes,
really
absolutely.
very beautiful to
Thank you
see.
all for your time. We've got a couple of questions. We are going to be following up. I just responded to you personally as well quickly. we will be following up with you. It's a variety of questions, so we'll pick that up together. But thank you so much. And
Yeah,
then if you could
and
please
we'll
leave some feedback in a survey that's coming up shortly, then that would be much appreciated.
and we will answer any unanswered questions that are for any of us, I guess, after. So we'll expect an email from
And
one
we
of
can
us.
circulate the presentation, Carol.
Definitely.
That was another question.
Mhm.
Perfect. All right.
Okay.
Thank you all so
Thank
much and
you.
have a really good day.
Have a lovely day. Bye,
All right.
guys.
Bye bye.